The college football playoff had a historic Saturday, and so did Sonny Dykes and the TCU Horned Frogs. In their first playoff appearance, number 3 TCU upset number 2 Michigan at the Fiesta Bowl 51-45 and are headed to the national championship for the first time since 1938. And that's coming off a losing season in 2021. How did the Cinderella story add one more stop to its wild ride? Well, let's break down one of the craziest playoff games in the history of college football. Welcome into our 24/7 Sports studios. I'm Grace Remington with our national college football analyst, Brandon Marcello, who was at the game in Glendale. So, Brandon, wild game, the highest scoring Fiesta Bowl ever, and the second highest scoring playoff game in the playoff history, just 44 points in the third quarter alone. So first, Brandon, tell us about the game day atmosphere in Glendale, and then what happened to both of these defenses to allow such an offensive explosion here?
Absolutely insane. And what happened was TCU got up early, and Michigan felt like they had to play TCU's game. They got up tempo, they got away from running the ball, and then a score fest broke out there late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter. During a stretch of 8 minutes and 25 seconds of game time, we had 56 combined points scored. It was absolutely incredible. It was like watching Rocky and Drago trading punches in Rocky IV, and neither of them were falling down. Michigan just kind of fell into TCU's trap. They played up-tempo. That's not their game, and TCU was just kind of swimming with the flow a little bit. And I never felt like TCU was actually in much danger. They led the entire time. Michigan got within 3 a couple times, but I really thought this was TCU's game from start to finish in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there was never a lead change. New territory for the Horned Frogs there. But let's keep talking about the winners. TCU was picked in the preseason poll to finish 7th in the Big 12. And now, in his first year at the helm, Sonny Dykes not only got his team to the playoff, but they knocked off a previously undefeated Michigan team to get to the national championship. So what did Sonny Dykes do in this game to get the Big 12 its first ever playoff win?
One, just great coaching. Also, I think he supplemented that roster quite well in the transfer portal. Their 2 top leading tacklers on TCU's defense weren't playing there last season. They brought them in from the transfer portal, including linebacker Johnny Hodges, who was at Navy last year and was thinking about quitting college football altogether and go play lacrosse, which he had been playing throughout his life. It's an incredible story on a lot of levels there at TCU. I think the fans there and also some of the coaches and players still don't believe that they're quite in the national championship. Being on that field as they were celebrating, you kind of just see them wandering around like ghosts. Like, yeah, this is really happening right now. But that team has just been able to kind of stick together and know that no matter what, we're going to have a chance to win games. And I was wondering when TCU got up 21-3, like, how are they going to handle this? They're not accustomed to this, but they handled it well. They knew Michigan was going to score some points at some point, but TCU had a counterpunch for every jab that Michigan was throwing at them. And that's a credit to that coaching staff. They just never give up. There's a lot of veteran leadership. And with Max Duggan at quarterback, an absolute gamer there, everybody trusts him just to get things done when they need things to happen offensively.
On the flip side, J.J. McCarthy had 3 interceptions entering this game. He threw 2 pick sixes against the Horned Frogs. He did rally them at the end, but how should Michigan fans feel about the rising junior heading into next season?
They should feel good. And I know it's a loss and he's throwing the picks, but J.J. McCarthy was going against that 3-3-5 defense that he has not ever faced. In fact, his first pick six was against man coverage, his first interception all season when facing man coverage. TCU's defense confused that Michigan offensive line quite a bit, but it also confused J.J. McCarthy. Windows that seemed wide open were closing quickly because TCU's defensive backs, especially Bud Clark there at safety, they close gaps so quickly, and both interceptions were that. Things looked open for a second, and they closed. That's not an excuse for J.J. McCarthy, but fans should feel good about him. And why do I say that? He was a big-time gamer in that game in the third and fourth quarters. I really liked what I saw there. He needs some more help at some other positions, particularly at wide receiver, and some help there with the coaching. I was not too impressed with the play calling in that game, especially the idea to go for a Philly special trick play on 4th and 2 near the goal line when you have been running the ball down TCU's throat on the first drive. And then, of course, that fumble on the goal line into the end zone when they handed the ball off to a linebacker. What are we doing, Michigan?
Yeah, Michigan suffering its second straight loss in the playoff. This one as a 7.5-point favorite at the time of kickoff. And you mentioned it, Brandon, uncharacteristic of a Jim Harbaugh-led team, from the play calling to the defense giving up a season-high 488 yards. So what do you think is next for Harbaugh and the Wolverines?
Sadly, this is nothing new, and Michigan fans should be a little upset right now and wondering about the future. Harbaugh has lost 5 straight bowl games as Michigan's head coach, including these last 2 in the semifinals. There is a disconnect there. And talking to people close to that Michigan program this past week at the Fiesta Bowl, they're wondering if he's just not handling things correctly in that 2 to 3 week, quote unquote, layoff from the regular season, the Big Ten championship game, to the bowl game. Something's not going on there. They went into the Fiesta Bowl this week all business, saying they had learned their lessons in that loss to Georgia in the semifinal last year. There was word that the players were told to be quiet on the bus rides to practices and back to the hotel. Everybody was marching into the stadium there at the Fiesta Bowl as if they were going to war. It was so serious and so silent. Meanwhile, you had TCU arriving on site a couple of days earlier and relaxing and then treating business like business when they needed to. Harbaugh, I think, just had a little bit of an overcorrection there and trying to change course there at Michigan. He needs to kind of center himself and reevaluate everything the way he handles this program when they go into the postseason, because whatever he's doing, it's not working. And changing it year to year as he did this past 2 years, from the Georgia semifinal game to now against TCU, he's got to stop making all these sudden changes. It's not going to help the team.
Yeah, stick with what you know, stick with what you're good at. So a bad day for the Big Ten, with Georgia beating Ohio State 42-41 in the Peach Bowl, the second semifinal game. Buckeye star wideout Marvin Harrison Jr. left the game in the second half with a concussion. That was after taking a massive hit from Jonathan Bullard in the end zone. So Brandon, how did losing Harrison affect the game?
I thought it was tremendous, and it did not help at all. Ohio State wins that game if Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the field. That offense didn't quite have that oomph that needed in the fourth quarter. And, of course, C.J. Stroud, absolutely, I think, his best game as an Ohio State quarterback, did everything he could to win that game, but he needed Marvin Harrison Jr. out there. You got to have a game breaker on the field to beat that Georgia defense. Ohio State was being successful, 1, because of Stroud, but 2, because of Marvin Harrison Jr. and the threat he provided Ohio State, even when they weren't throwing the ball to him. That affected the way Georgia defended Ohio State. And, of course, when he was not in the game in the fourth quarter, that slowed down Ohio State's offense. And as much as credit as Stetson Bennett and Georgia's offense deserve for that comeback in the fourth quarter, scoring 18 points, they lose that game if Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the field.
So Ryan Day is 45-6 as Ohio State's head coach. Yet before the semifinal game even happened, there were fans calling for his head. He's lost to Michigan twice in a row now has this playoff loss. So how hot is Ryan Day's seat, do you think?
I mean, it's warm. I mean, no one's going to fire him unless there's just a crazy upcoming season in 2023. I will say this. For as successful as Ohio State and Michigan have been in this era, and it's great to see both of them be so good here these last 2 to 3 years in the playoff era, this is kind of an inflection point for both programs going into the Big Ten in 2023. Jim Harbaugh struggling in the postseason after winning back-to-back Big Ten titles. Ohio State suddenly losing to Michigan after winning 8 straight games in the game. So what course corrections do we see here? I was talking about Jim Harbaugh earlier. He seems to overcompensate and make some weird corrections. What's Ryan Day going to do going forward? He hired Jim Knowles as his defensive coordinator to stop exactly what happened in this semifinal game and what happened against Michigan in the regular season finale that kept them out of the Big Ten championship game. So that's not working. How do you tweak it to make sure it works? And in Michigan, I already mentioned the already aforementioned problems. I think both fan bases have a reason to be upset, but don't go jumping over the cliffs thinking that things are all over and we need to make changes, because these are about as good as coaches as you'll see on the college football level. They just need to make some minor tweaks.
All right, we've seen Georgia kind of all season long maybe play with their food. I feel like we still haven't seen their full potential, but in this game, they came back from 14-point deficits in both halves. So what makes this team so resilient?
Stetson Bennett. I think a lot like Max Duggan at TCU, you're seeing with Stetson Bennett the last 2 to 3 years, a guy that they just trust implicitly. They know that he's going to get it done. But also, let's not forget this. And Kirby Smart said this after the game. He's like, listen, Stetson did not play well in the third quarter. He was 1 of 4 passing, I think, for 17 yards. Fourth quarter, absolute baller and gamer, and they won that game because of him in that comeback. Stetson Bennett deserves all the credit, but also a little bit of criticism for the way things were going in that third quarter when they were down double digits. Georgia, however, going into this national championship game, I can't wait to watch this. We'll talk about it more later, but my goodness, Stetson Bennett against Max Duggan, the top 2 gamer quarterbacks in the sport going at each other. It's going to be incredible to watch. But, man, Bennett is a guy who deserved that Heisman type of talk, despite a lot of people poo-pooing the idea that he deserved to be in New York City.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Stetson Bennett, the MVP of the game, throwing over 400 yards and leading that game-winning drive in the final minute. He had several playmakers helping him out, too. 7 different wide receivers catching a pass for more than 20 yards, and then the defense stifling Ohio State's run game. So plenty of options here, but what do you think is the biggest reason for Georgia pulling out this win?
Well, I think it's Stetson Bennett just being able to deliver the ball to different receivers, as you mentioned there. Of course, Arian Smith, that 76-yard touchdown pass was absolutely incredible. But Stetson is just a guy who knows where guys are going to be on the field, and he's not afraid to go to his second or third read. Not a lot of quarterbacks. It's as easy as it sounds to go to your second read. It's really not that easy, especially when you're on the big stage like that. And for Stetson to struggle the way he did in that third quarter and then just put together really maybe the best quarter of his career, considering the circumstances and the way Georgia was playing at that time offensively, was incredible. And I understand when you saw Stetson Bennett after that game crying and being emotional and everybody's just looking at him like, well, you've been in this situation before. Well, he put everything on the line for them and was just absolutely incredible in a big, big spot for them. And again, I can't wait to see what he does in the national championship game, because he has solidified himself as a legend at Georgia, obviously, after already winning a national title. But I think if he wins a national championship in back-to-back years, he will be considered a legend on the college football level and someone that we'll see pictures of and highlights of for years to come as the former walk-on who went on to glory and dominated the sport for 2 years.
Yeah, an absolutely incredible Hollywood story from him. Walk-on and JUCO transfer to potential back-to-back national champion. He deserves all the happy tears. All right, thanks, Brandon, for your insight and time. And for more coverage leading up to the national championship game on January 9th, subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel and to 247sports.com.